Hello and welcome to episode 140 of Magic Rays of Light, a podcast exploring the world of Apple TV and so much more. I'm your host, Devin Dundee. I'm joined by my co-host, Sigmund Judge. This is our London Film Festival special, and it is a special because we have a man on the ground this week. Sigmund, how has your week been?
It's been absolutely insane. I am beyond shattered, let me say, catching films from the wee hours of the morning until the spooky hours at night, especially around this time of year. But this is a time of year that is incredibly special for Londoners. And I think it's a special time of year wherever you might have a local film festival. But for London, especially post-COVID, there has been an incredible swelling of support from major film studios all over. And the British Film Institute, who run this festival, do a really, really good job on education and funding for film and new people that want to make it into the business. So it's beautiful to see that the support from Apple Original Films continues this year. The first festival post-COVID had the European premiere for Tragedy of Macbeth, and we've seen other films since. Of course, Martin Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon last year, alongside Fingernails, and a film that we didn't know at the time was going to be an Apple original, Fancy Dance, made its debut at this festival. This year's a really special year, though, because not only did we get a showcase of Disclaimer from Alfonso Cuarón, available to stream as you're hearing this, but also the opening gala for this year's festival was Blitz from Steve McQueen. It's a film that we've been waiting a long, long time to see and to talk about, and I had the distinct privilege of being able to see a screening of the film ahead of the opening gala. That was followed by a mini press conference and a screen talk from Steve McQueen, and we will share coverage of that as and when we get approval. But overall, this has just been a really, really fun time. It's been great to talk to people that are grips or, lighting or budding actors or directors and producers. But it's also been just a real joy to really mix it up with people from within the industry that are, well thought of and respected. Matt Dentler, the head of Apple Original Films, he used to be the director for South by Southwest, so he knows what this is all about, and I got to say hello to him earlier this week as well. It's just been a really, really fun time. Just some films I'm going to rattle off very quickly. All of You, written by Brett Goldstein and starring Brett Goldstein alongside Imogen Poots. A fantastic sci-fi comedy / melodrama. Hits really, really hard. Of course, Edward Berger's Conclave, which is out very, very soon. That made its premiere at this year's London Film Festival. And there's other films like A Real Pain, directed and starring Jesse Eisenberg, alongside Kieran Culkin. An absolutely hilarious but heartbreaking film. And then to top it off, you just have a collection of so many films that are coming very, very soon. And I can't wait to watch them all. But Devin, honestly, there just isn't enough time.
Well, it sounds like you've had a really great week and a lot of fun and maybe deserve a well-deserved nap after we get done recording here. No doubt lots and lots of up next picks in your queue now for future episodes to share as these films are coming out. So really cool. I'm glad you've got to have that experience and share it with us here on the show. That's awesome. Well, you've had a busy week, but we've got a really busy week here on the podcast as well. Everything coming up this week includes the surprise release of Submerged, the first immersive scripted short film for Apple Vision Pro, just out of the blue. Really, really amazing busy week for Edward Berger as well. Our highlight of the highly anticipated series Disclaimer from Alfonso Cuarón, which you mentioned before. We're going to go deep on that later in the episode. But we have to start with the film that, as you mentioned, made its world debut this week with you in attendance, and that is, of course, Blitz. Sir Steve McQueen's upcoming feature film made its global debut with the opening gala presentation of the London Film Festival on Wednesday evening at London's Royal Festival Hall. Told through the gaze of 9-year-old George, we follow his journey back home through London during the height of the Blitz.
What is your name?
George.
So how the hell did you end up here?
My mom sent me away.
She did it to keep you safe.
Your son did not arrive at his destination.
I'll be back when I've found my boy.
This is for all the parents whose children have been evacuated, and for my boy, George.
As we've mentioned, this of course comes to us from director Steve McQueen, starring Saoirse Ronan, Elliot Heffernan, Harris Dickinson, Aaron Kellyman, Stephen Graham, Paul Weller, and Kathy Burke, with cinematography from Jörg Lasso and music from Hans Zimmer. Sigmund, we've been anticipating this film for some time. I've gotten to see the trailer, and we talked about that, and I'm very excited based on that. But you've now seen Blitz, so tell us, what can we expect from this film?
I think, Devon, expect the unexpected. And that is something that I think we've been able to say for Steve McQueen's whole career. He is, of course, a well thought of and exceptional story maker and auteur, really, because he doesn't just produce feature films. He produces art installations and photography and everything in between. An exceptional talent who was the first black director to win an Academy Award for his film 12 Years a Slave at the same time that he won the Turner Prize for something completely different. His films leading up to Blitz have all been very, very different, but are connected by pain, whether that is through personal obsession, through politics, through wartime. And I spoke about Occupied City at the end of last year, which was Steve McQueen's adaptation of his wife's book about the atrocities that were committed during the Second World War in Amsterdam. And the documentary, which is 4.5 hours, it premiered last year at London Film Festival. It interspliced those stories of that time with contemporary images. It's really, really shocking. So it's interesting to see Blitz, which is a very, very different film to that. It's a narrative feature that tells the story of a time where London was under bombardment every night over 8 months from Nazi Germany, who would bombard with the Blitzkrieg, otherwise known as the Lightning War, where bombs just rained down every night across 16 different cities in the United Kingdom. And people would rush to the underground for shelter, and in the morning they'd come up and half of their town had gone, right? Buildings that they knew, maybe neighbours, crumbled, bodies absolutely desecrated due to the explosions. And yet in the morning, life carried on. Markets reopened, shops reopened. There was a revolution taking place under this harshness, of war. And Steve McQueen really covers all of that here. Now, I'm quite lucky in the sense that I've had the privilege of hearing directly from people that lived through that time, and especially in London. And as soon as you bring up the war, and as much as they want to talk about it, you hear their voice start to break. You you see the pain etched on their face, and you kind of feel this weird vibration coursing through the body of guilt in a sense, but also of fear and trepidation. And so a lot of the time, the words that are being spoken don't necessarily marry up with the emotions. I think Steve McQueen does that with Blitz, and he tells the story of London during that time by using the gaze of a 9-year-old black boy. And that's going to be something that stands out to people, because when it comes to the Second World War, first off, we didn't really have a story to reference that really focused on working class people, right? The people that were creating ammunition, the men that didn't necessarily go to war because they were too old for service or just weren't able to, who ended up being air raid wardens instead, making sure that everyone had their lights switched off so they weren't such an easy target. But he also captures the sheer terror and the sadness that goes along with packing your child off to somewhere safer, right? And during that time, 800,000 children were packed and sent on trains to go to the countryside whilst parents stayed home. And that's where this story starts, through George, played by Elliot Hefferman. It's a fantastic debut, who is having to abandon a place of safety for him, right? In a world that isn't as racially diverse and therefore is far more racially prejudiced and bigoted than it is today. And so when he is packed on this train, he receives that racial abuse, and it's not long before he jumps overboard to find his way back home to the safety and sanctity of his mother and grandfather. And that is the basis of George's journey, which I think is really, really interesting. Steve McQueen is taking the trauma that I think is intergenerational and the patriotism that is of the Blitz story, and allowing the audience to be in a moment of vulnerability that then makes it easier to be able to process someone else's trauma, especially trauma within the black experience. And I think it's done artfully. I haven't mentioned any of the other cast because whilst their stories are important, it's George's story that is the vehicle that really sets the tone and shows you the story of London. It's not long actually before he gets back to London, and so the majority of the story is actually him getting from Clapham to Stepney in East London. And while Steve McQueen's other films have been quite cutting, I expected something quite similar to that. But what he does is he tells this story, and a story of a far more diverse London than has ever been shown on screen from a wartime perspective. And he wraps it in a package that really is more a tribute to traditional British cinema when it comes to classic family storytellers like Lyle Jeffries, the director of The Railway Children, and of course Cole Reed, the director of the original Oliver. But he mixes it with Hollywood sensibility akin to, I think, Steven Spielberg's best work. So there's a lot going on. The first scene of this film is ferocious, right? It's straight after the bombs have dropped, and firemen are trying to control this hose before trying to control the fire. But this is overall surprisingly quite a quiet film. It's a film that is quiet enough to allow you to think, and the score from Hans Zimmer is amazing. The photography in this film from cinematographer Yorick Lasso, in his debut collaboration with Steve McQueen, is outstanding. Every scene is crafted so beautifully from a lighting perspective. I don't think I've seen visuals like this for a period piece. There is one name in this film that I do want to talk about very quickly, and that is Benjamin Clementine as Ife. Benjamin Clementine was in Dune Part 2, but here he plays a Nigerian air raid warden who finds George and tries to get him back home and at least get him to safety during the Blitz as he's back in London. And this is following an escapade that is very, as I say, Oliver-like and Fagin-like, with the brilliant Kathy Burke and Stephen Graham as this villainous pair who, honestly, they are robbing from the dead and robbing from shops, and he's kind of tricked into joining them. But he gets away and he meets Ife, who is based off of a real air raid warden from Nigeria, helping in London. It's a beautiful, beautiful partnership. I think it's the best partnership in this film. Don't get me wrong, Saoirse Ronan, Harris Dickinson, even the great Paul Weller as Grandfather Gerald. They're all fantastic, but this was a moment in the film that I think a lot of people are going to be talking about. And I don't know if it's a big enough role for Benjamin Clementine to get any kind of award kudos for. I do think we'll see something for Elliot Hefferman, a debut that is just so well directed. And I'm just going to leave it at that, Devon. I don't want to ruin too much for this film. It's not long until Blitz is going to be in cinemas and then very soon coming to streaming. But I will say that this is a film that I did not expect to have seen. It surprised me in a good way. I think it's going to be quite challenging for some people, but I also think that this is a film that others really needed to be made, right? And others really need to see, because it allows for that patriotism that may otherwise be kind of defined by race in previous films to seep through, and for those stories that we have never heard before from the working class to be heard. So that is my kind of first thoughts and first review of Blitz. We'll be talking about this more. I will actually be seeing this film again over the weekend at London Film Festival. And I do very quickly want to say, if you are in the UK, the BFI and the London Film Festival have screenings across the UK taking place over this next week. So do be on the lookout for those.
Well, awesome. Really happy to hear your thoughts on Blitz. I mean, the fact that you're watching it again this weekend is a great sign. Everyone will be able to watch it very soon. It's going to be in select theaters on November 1st and streaming everywhere on Apple TV Plus November 22nd. So not long to wait till we can all see Blitz, and I'm sure we'll be talking about it some more then. So moving from a film that we've been anticipating for quite some time to one that kind of came out of the blue this week, but does share that World War II connection, let's talk about Submerged.
A World War II submarine crew combats a harrowing torpedo attack in this adrenaline-pumping thrill ride and first narrative feature for Apple Vision Pro.
Everything we're doing here is the first time that anyone's ever doing it. When you put on the Apple Vision Pro, it does change the way you think about creating a story. It's a wonderful new medium that just expands the horizon of storytelling. Because you're not watching a movie anymore. You're inside the story. is going to change the future of filmmaking.
This is written and directed by Edward Berger, director of the Academy Award-winning Best Film, All Quiet on the Western Front, the first immersive scripted short film for Apple Vision Pro. And I'm going to say it, Devon, I genuinely wish Blitz had been an immersive video production. This is, however, by far, I think, my highlight of this week's releases. Did you feel the same? I mean, it came out of nowhere.
It really did. And I agree with you. This is the highlight of the week. You know, we found out just a couple days before that it was coming, and we've been looking forward to it since WWDC, but we didn't know when at this point later in the year we were going to see it. And in a week that was already so packed, this really did rise to the top, right? I mean, there's so much happening in the world of Apple Originals right now. Even if you're not in London right now, there's just so much amazing stuff happening. But this really did just set the bar so high, and we both got to see this earlier today as we're recording, and I'd say I'm still buzzing from it. Would you say the same?
Absolutely. I kind of anticipating this release, I watched Blitz really thinking, I wish this had been shot in the Apple immersive video format. But yeah, I was still a little bit concerned that narrative filmmaking wouldn't necessarily work for the format. I'm happy to say I was completely wrong, Devon. But when you took the Apple Vision Pro and you placed it on your head and got ready for it, what were your expectations, and did they fulfill them?
I didn't have a ton of expectations. Of course, we've seen the nonfiction immersive content from Apple so far, which has just been so enjoyable. So I was a little questioning how exactly that would translate, what kind of techniques they would be using. And, there's just so many different directions this could go. It's really groundbreaking in a lot of ways. This is a first for the format. And so they're kind of establishing what it's going to be like. But I would say my expectations were high based on the creative team and the way that Apple has promoted it. They certainly believe in it and believe not only in this format, but in its power for storytelling and in its place in the future of cinematography, which is, some big statements to be making. But I think in every sense, this film really met those expectations and got us started in a really good place in terms of the fictional format for immersive video. So let's talk about it a little bit. We mentioned this takes place during World War II. It happens on the USS Stingray, which is a submarine working in secret in the South China Sea in September of 1944. Again, just more details about the World War that I didn't know about these secret submarines that were, gathering intel way deep under the ocean and kind of trying to stay under the radar. I guess maybe that's even where that term comes from, but, just really trying to stay out of the enemy's view. This particular film follows James Dyson, who's played by Jordan Barton, as he and his crew come under attack and attempt to survive. And Apple promotes this as a thrill ride, and I would say it certainly delivers on that front. It had my heart racing the entire time. And, that's not to say that a traditional film or TV show can't get me excited and get me into it, but this, with the immersion, I think that word ride actually kind of feels very, very right for this sort of thing. There's more to it than just watching. You feel like you're a part of the action as it's taking place around you. And it just really, this format lends itself so well to that kind of adrenaline pumping storytelling, because you just feel like you're there and you feel the shock and the horror of these men as they realize what's happening to them. And then as they're all trying to get into place and respond to the situation they find themselves in, you instantly connect with what they're doing and you feel like you're in the room with them.
I think, just kind of rewinding a little bit, something that I thought was masterful about this is how it starts with James Dyson waking up. And I thought it was interesting that they decided to do that, because there was part of me that felt like, oh, is this a dream? And therefore the threat, being in an immersive experience like this softened, which I thought was really, really helpful for this. I just very, very quickly wanted to mention that.
the film kind of plays on the expectations and anticipation of itself, right? It knows what it is. And so there are some little, maybe fake out is the wrong word for it, but there's this buildup of tension and then this release before you really get to the main action. So it's a short film, but it takes you on a journey, I would say, throughout those 17 minutes, which, by the way, went by so quickly for me. I was like, wait, it's over? Like, I thought there was more. I was so sad when it was over because it really grabbed me. This whole thing takes place again on a submarine, and we'll talk a little bit more about the behind the scenes in a minute, but the set itself is a recreation of a submarine in every sense of the word. The walls are tight, and everything is made to look real and give you the impression that you really are on a submarine. And what that gives you is this very enclosed and isolated feeling, which is the opposite of what we've come to expect from immersive content, right? Because usually the immersive content that we've seen, it's about either height, taking in these beautiful scenes, or these very dangerous sports that people are participating in and getting scope and distance, or it's about wildlife, which again, a lot of that takes place outside and is very expansive. This, despite the fact that it's 180 degrees, it's 3D, it's very immersive. You're immersed in a tiny space, and you really feel that as you're going throughout the film. And I feel like that almost claustrophobic feeling isn't something you can necessarily get from just a TV screen or a movie screen that you're watching, because there's just a difference. Being immersed here, you really you feel like you're on that submarine, and you feel the tightness of it immediately.
And the tightness isn't just on the submarine itself, right, and the structure of the submarine, but also some of the shots, right? The establishing shots in this are masterful. James Friend, once again collaborating with Edward Berger, following All Quiet on the Western Front and the Showtime film Your Honor, does a masterful job in allowing there to be enough space to look either left or right, and explore the scene, but finds a way of drawing you to where he wants you to look, right? There are some other scenes that are top down and slightly at an angle as well. It is a textbook example on how I'd imagine other narrative storytellers are going to want to use this going forward.
One thing that I appreciated as the film went on was the juxtaposition, or the use of both those tight shots and the wider ones. You're getting some really good shots of Dyson's face and his facial expressions. There's even one shot when he's walking down a hallway and it looks like he's staring straight at you, because he's just looking straight down the barrel of the camera, which is not something you usually get in a film. But then you cut to these wider shots of the room and all these guys as they're working and preparing, trying to establish some control over the situation. And you get the depth and all the movement, because you can turn your head left and right, and you can really take in just the breadth of what's going on here as well. So, yeah, I feel like this format is used really effectively here. Again, this is the first time we're seeing it done, and the way that they use all these different kinds of shots and movement to direct your attention while also giving you the freedom to explore, I think they hit that balance really, really well. And for me, the effect that this all had and what you're going for, I think, when you're crafting something like this, is my disbelief was suspended almost immediately. I was just in it. I was just a part of the story. I was so invested in the fate of Dyson and his crewmates because I really felt like I was on the ship with him. And they didn't go the direction that they could have, and I thought maybe they might have, where you're a character and they refer to you, which is another kind of thing they could do with this immersive content, or someone might try it at some point. But even though you're not a character in the story, you feel like you're a part of this crew. You're in it with them. And as they're going down these hallways through these tight little doorways and closing the hatches, it really does just feel like you're there. And that's the purpose of this immersive content. But the psychological impact on you and the way that makes you invest in the story and the characters, I think it's hard to understate that. And it just makes for such a satisfying experience when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I was just absolutely blown away by this. I just wish we had a little bit more time to have prepared ourselves, because I'm going to be sharing this feature film with anyone that I can get the Apple Vision Pro on. I'm interested to see if the demos change in store to include some of this, but I'm just super, super excited for the future of film in this format. And I genuinely think now that we've seen this, that there is a genius that's currently taking place, despite a lot of the naysayers, on Apple Vision Pro, mainly due to the price. But, the production, the distribution channel, and the hardware, all controlled by Apple. I've not seen anything this good from anyone else. I think it's going to be very, very tough to compete on this level when it comes to immersive video filmmaking. I do want to talk a little bit about the immersive video filmmaking, because we got some crazy detail that you've detailed in an article on Mac Stories this week. Of course, the first Apple immersive narrative feature from Edward Berger, partnering up with James Friend, which we've mentioned already. But this production was just an altogether different level. So it was shot on location in Prague, Brussels, and Malta over 3 weeks, filmed using a full-scale 23-ton submarine set made from real steel, brass, and metal that was modelled after a World War II era vessel. There were significant portions of the set that were built to withstand being fully submerged, and it featured practical camera traps and special effects that were uniquely rigged to expose Apple immersive video cameras to sparks, steam, water, and fire without breaking viewers' sense of immersion. Cast members who might appear out of frame or focus in a 2D feature were meticulously scripted and participated in extensive stunt rehearsals, including free dive training in dive tanks and open water to maintain continuity and realism. And I think that's a really interesting takeaway, because in an era where productions are talking about, scanning extras, and that's not going to work here. and so filmmakers are going to have to be meticulous, but so are the teams and the production companies. And there's going to be, just for this crowd, there's going to be more opportunity going forward. I'm just absolutely blown away by all of the detail in this. The only detail that's kind of lacking is how they shot this. What are the cameras that are being used? Of course, we know Blackmagic are currently working on the first consumer Apple immersive video camera, which is a modification of their Cine Ursa camera line. Do we have any more detail on that just yet?
We don't have detail, but I have a theory. I think there's just one Apple immersive camera that they're just taking to all these different places. We've seen it, the white box with the 2 lenses. We've seen it with Alicia Keys. We've seen it at the NBA All-Star Weekend and at the Super Bowl. I think Apple's just picking that thing up and taking it from place to place. That's the one that they're using, and they just dunked it underwater to see what happened and hope it survived. Not really, but it is amazing what they're doing with this immersive format, and the fact that it will be available soon to more creators is exciting. Right now it's still really locked down in terms of who can make these sorts of things, and kind of had to have a collaboration with Apple, but I'm interested to see what the distribution looks like in the future as more filmmakers are able to actually make this. But I also want to point listeners to a behind the scenes video, the making of Submerged, that came out on the Apple YouTube channel this week, because it has some incredible details about how they made this in terms of, again, the camera can see everything, right? So you're not having this little set and all these things just out of shot that are not supposed to be there. The whole set has to be realistic looking, including all the actors to the sides and in the background. But that also means they have to be really creative in the way that they set up their cameras and camera movements. And you're not using a traditional dolly here to move your camera around because you'd see the track in the shot as you're moving. So they had to be really creative in terms of the set was very realistic. It really was a scale submarine that they were working in. And then they had to not have a bunch of just film stuff lying around. And the other thing that really impressed me, and it's obvious when you think about it as you're watching it, but if you're not thinking about it, I don't think you'd actually notice it, is all the lighting is practical because they don't have a bunch of lights sitting around. You can't because you would see them in the camera. And so the lighting of the submarine, the way that the characters' faces are lit and things like that, you see them flip the light switch on, and that's the lighting that they're using to light the actors. It's incredible. And I feel like this immersive format, it's a new storytelling format for sure, but from a creative perspective, it's also a new challenge for filmmakers to take on in a way that they haven't before. And I feel like that's going to be exciting for a lot of people who are going to want to get their hands on these cameras and get started making some immersive content.
Yeah, so a few years ago, I was lucky enough to go to like a lighting school class hosted by Aperture Lights that James Friend presented. I would be shocked if Apple don't use that connection in a way where filmmakers are going to be able to learn before maybe even the tools are available on how to create. And I think James is going to be the perfect teacher for that, but we'll have to wait and see. What we do know is that if you have an Apple Vision Pro, you can stream or download Submerged, the first Apple immersive video narrative feature from Apple TV, for free now in Australia, Canada, France, Germany, Hong Kong, Japan, Singapore, the UK, and of course, the United States. After this experience, I'm an absolute believer in the format from a narrative feature context. I'm just desperate for more.
Well, I have some good news for you in terms of immersive content. It's nonfiction, but still, we'll take all the immersive content that we can get. And Apple has announced new Apple immersive video content coming later this year in the US, with global availability to follow. If you're listening to that list that Sigmund just gave of where you can watch Submerged, it's pretty amazing they got that out everywhere at the same time, so many places, and that has not been the case with other Apple immersive video content, and it sounds like that's going to continue to be the trend going forward for now at least. But in the US, these are the dates, and we'll keep you posted as they come out internationally. Next Friday, October 17th, we've got NBA All-Star Weekend. Some clips from the different events there, including the three-point contest and the game itself, which is very exciting. We knew that they were there. We saw the cameras and pictures, and now we're going to actually get to see the result of that. Next month, we're going to see an immersive music video from The Weeknd featuring a brand new song off the upcoming album Hurry Up Tomorrow. Been hearing a lot about this. We weren't sure exactly what it was going to be. Was it going to be a concert or what, but it sounds like it's going to be some kind of music video experience. But if you're looking for immersive concerts, Apple does have something for you, a new series called Concert for One. It's coming later this year, featuring intimate performances from the world's biggest artists, beginning with a special set from British singer-songwriter Ray. That's exciting. If you're a fan of adventure, the sports series that really gets my stomach every time I watch it, there's a new episode coming later this year called Ice Dive.
Oh, dear.
This one follows freediver Ant Williams as he attempts to best his record for the longest distance under ice with just a single breath. Wow. There are some pictures of this in the press release that Apple put out, and no thank you, but I'll watch it. I'll watch it. Early next year, we've got another episode of Adventure. This one features a free solo climb with Kai Leitner in Mallorca, Spain. And there's a second episode of Elevated coming early next year that goes through Maine in the autumn. So that sounds exciting. Lots and lots of just really great immersive content coming. Seems like, roughly one-ish a month, a couple months where we're getting two, which is great. Hope to see that pace continue to stay strong and maybe even pick up and see those international releases come sooner and sooner after the US releases, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, in no time, we're going to have hours and hours of immersive video to watch, and not just reels. I'm blown away by this. We both picked up an Apple Vision Pro at launch. It's a really exciting... I mean, I use it as an entertainment device predominantly, right? You use it as a work and spatial computer. Fantastic. But from an immersive video point of view and from an entertainment point of view, I have zero regrets. It is absolutely outstanding, especially this week. And with everything coming, absolutely blown away. And I'm seeing posts all over social media from people saying, hey, I've started using it again. And I thought, that's a nice coincidence.
Yeah, when the content's there, people will come, right? And that's what we like to see. There was some interesting behind-the-scenes news of Apple Vision Pro this week. We found out that project lead Dan Riccio is going to be retiring from Apple. He was kind of the champion for Apple Vision Pro within Apple, as far as we know, and led the team there and getting it out the door. Did a great job, I think, of creating the product and really getting it to a place where you and I and lots of other people are very much enjoying it. Now the team is going to be moving under the direction of John Turnus, the hardware lead, which I think is really cool to see. That means that the Visions group, the group that was creating Apple Vision Pro, is now going to be considered alongside Apple's other hardware teams and kind of moved into that group, which I think bodes well for its future in Apple's lineup and speaks to where it's at in its development and how it's going to continue to be invested in.
I think kind of looking back on June, right, and all of the announcements for Apple Intelligence and that side of things, I am more convinced than ever, especially after reading your recent review for Vision OS 2 and our constant talk on Apple Vision Pro and Apple Vision as a platform. This is the future. Whether it's entertainment with its spatial computing, and it might not be in the form factor that it is now, but I think it's very, very clear that this is the vision, and we're already able to take part in it.
Yeah, it's exciting. It still feels like living in the future when I put that thing on, and we'll continue to do so, I think, for some time, which is great. Now, for those who are sticking with 2D content for now, of course, lots and lots to talk about there as well. Let's talk about soccer for a second, or should I say football? Let me be sensitive to our international listeners. Sorry about that. Lionel Messi's first playoff match, October 25th on MLS Season Pass, will be made available free for everyone in the TV app, and it will be shown live on the 25,000 square foot video screen at Times Square in New York City. So Apple really wants to make sure that everyone knows, hey, Lionel Messi's in the MLS, he's in MLS Season Pass, he's in the playoffs this year for the first time because he didn't come in, late enough in the season last time to turn it around for Miami. But they're there now. He's still the center of their whole kind of marketing push for MLS Season Pass, and now they're putting it on the biggest screen I guess they could possibly rent out for that time.
Yeah. Get out the pink ribbons, I think, this time. We'll have to wait and see.
Moving to a different type of game, let's talk about games that we can play on our phones, iPads, and of course on our Apple TVs. Next month's Apple Arcade releases have also been revealed. 4 new games will be joining the service on November 7th, including Wheel of Fortune Daily, a game that I am so excited about. I am obsessed with Wheel of Fortune. I have been my entire life. And I'll be playing this from the moment it's available.
Daily.
Exactly. I'll be playing it every day. Yeah, you're right. Also coming November 7th is Drive Ahead Carcade, which features multiplayer car battle madness. Then Arkanoid vs. Space Invaders Plus, which is block breaking meets alien blasting. This is incredible. This is like nostalgia just turned up to 11, and I can't wait for it.
Yeah, I'm miming a big cheer, which doesn't really work for audio. But yes, very, very excited. I've always loved the classic Arkanoid and Space Invaders games, and there better be a leaderboard. Oh, there's got to be a score chase happening.
Oh boy.
Another daily play for me, at least.
Yeah, I have to imagine I'll be playing that one as well. And then finally, Texas Hold'em Poker Pokerist Plus is also coming to the service on November 7th. Other game updates coming this month include a 50th anniversary celebration in Hello Kitty Island Adventure, a new map called the Ancient Portal in Bloons TD6 Plus, and the addition of Backgammon to Game Room on Apple Vision Pro. So we might have to break out Game Room again, and I don't think I've ever played Backgammon, but maybe we could learn together.
Let's start at chess, Devon. Let's start at chess. I'll teach you chess, and then we'll go to backgammon.
Sounds good.
Another thing that sounds good, season 1 of Severance will be released on Blu-ray on December 17th, right ahead of the holiday season, and just in time for a rewatch during the holidays leading up to season 2 in January. This is a 3-disc set being released by Fifth Season. 1080p HD, not 4K UHD unfortunately, but the bonus of this is that the soundtrack is a DTS HD 5.1 surround sound soundtrack, and if you're nerdy about these things, you will be placing a pre-order just like I have this week.
Well, I think we're both very excited for the return of Severance in January. This is a great way to get ready for it. But a return that we have talked about and talked about and talked about. We finally have some confirmed news that you were able to break this week, Sigmund. Tell us about Ted Lasso Season 4.
Yeah, I wish I had a button that just went world exclusive, but instead I'm just going to use a silly voice. But yeah, we're very fortunate on this podcast. We've been hosting Magic Rays of Light for a number of years now, and during that time we've had the privilege of making contacts within the industry. Some friends have been involved in previous seasons of Ted Lasso, and they got the call that 4th season was going into pre-production in London as soon as January, which is very, very exciting. They've been hired once again to be involved in the return of AFC Richmond and Ted Lasso. So very, very cool. We don't have any concrete details on the story, the plot, the talent that is involved. But what we do know, and the reason that we can confirm this as 100% proof, is that there is documentation circulating from the production company behind the series, Shoe Bucket, which is, I believe, either a subsidiary of or completely owned by Warner Discovery. So really, really interesting. But yeah, 100% confirmed. Not possibly. I know there were some reports of my report out there that were kind of, being a little bit iffy on their language. I will say, really appreciate everyone that did share the report, that also shared links to Magic Rays of Light. It's greatly appreciated, and that's how, the open web works. We support one another. So, yeah, very, very cool. But yes, the news is we're getting more Ted Lasso. At least we're getting more AFC Richmond. It is listed as Season 4. We'll have to wait and see. Brett Goldstein, who's doing the rounds, not only on this side of the Atlantic, but I'd imagine on the other side of the Atlantic where you are for the launch of Shrinking Season 2. He's been very kind of coy, but he's been slowly hinting at certain things in interviews whilst promoting all of you. But yeah, it's happening, Devon. It's happening.
It's happening, and we couldn't be more excited. Can't wait to hear more about it as we get closer and closer to production starting. And of course, if we hear anything more, listeners will be the first to know about it.
In terms of development, in development right now is Sugar, which has been officially renewed for another season by Apple. No surprise there from us. I think it would have been incredibly disappointing if it hadn't, especially with some of the viewing figures that leaked during the course of its run. After the events, though, of Season 1, Season 2 will see Sugar back in Los Angeles, taking on another missing persons case as he continues to look for answers surrounding his own missing sister. Again, a fascinating show with some great sci-fi elements and a real get for Apple. I think Apple do the best sci-fi, right? We've got Silo coming soon. Again, Season 3 in pre-production right now, with shoots ready to begin in Wales as Season 2 makes its way to our screens. But we have even more sci-fi news. In terms of casting, Amber Midthunder has joined season 2 of Monarch Legacy of Monsters in a heavily recurring role, as reported this week by Variety. The actress is best known for her starring role in the Predator film Prey, but in Monarch, Midthunder will appear as Isabel, described as an intelligent and powerful businesswoman. Very, very cool. It's going to be interesting to see where Monarch Legacy of Monsters goes next. And, you know, we've talked about scoops and stuff. There was one that didn't quite work out. Apple Vision Pro immersive video. I still think it's going to happen. And it might have been something that was just super, super early that was shared with me. But I think, you know, in terms of Apple immersive video, Monarch Legacy of Monsters still makes absolute sense.
Most definitely. Well, more ties between Apple Originals and Apple Immersive Video are definitely going to be welcome. There's a scene in the most recent Apple Original film, Wolves, that I think would make a great immersive video. Of course, that's the one when the young man is flipping over the car. I think that would be amazing to see in 3D, but we'll have to wait and see if that ever comes to fruition. But we did get some good news about Wolves this week, finding out that it broke records during its opening weekend, becoming the most viewed film in Apple TV Plus history, and boosting the service's viewership by nearly 30% week over week. The film also topped Luminate's original streaming movie chart for the week with just over 4 million viewers. So a great opening for Wolves. Very happy to see it be so successful after all the questions about how it was going to come out, where we were going to see it, and who was going to see it, if anybody was going to see it. Well, the answer is yes. Lots of people watched it, and it did very well on streaming.
Mm-hmm.
With Matt Dentler, who we mentioned earlier in the show, head of Apple Original Films, saying, "When George, Brad, and John approached us with the idea for Wolves, it was an easy call. A crackling, fun movie starring 2 Oscar winners who everyone knows are iconic together. Now audiences have chosen in droves to make Wolves part of their weekend, making the movie a global blockbuster. We always consider Apple TV Plus to be the home for the world's most talented artists to create and deliver their best work, and it's exciting to see audiences embrace that so overwhelmingly." I think he summed it up well.
Yeah, he did, and I cannot wait for the sequel. If you've seen the film already, you'll know where it leaves off, and it just leaves you wanting more. And on this occasion, that's a good thing. Now, for those that haven't checked out Wolves, and maybe a lot of the Apple originals that we're talking about, maybe this is the first time you're listening to the podcast, you will soon have the opportunity to subscribe to Apple TV Plus via the Amazon Prime Video app as a $9.99 a month add-on subscription in the US, including, of course, Apple Originals, Friday Night Baseball, and select MOS Season Pass matches. What's interesting about this is I saw my friend Benjamin Mayo kind of say that he felt it was a positive and a negative in the sense that the Amazon Prime Video app really is kind of eating up a lot of video real estate at the moment. Lots of sports rights that Amazon Prime are getting. Of course, they bought MGM not that long ago, and have a great film division. X-Ray, which is something that Apple have mimicked with Apple Originals, is a quality bonus add-on to their player. And they have a lot of power when it comes to the different services they offer. All of the channels that Apple offer within the TV app, plus more. And they also have sports integrations outside of North America. So there's a lot that the Prime Video app is doing right. Of course, they probably also supplied the data to a lot of these streamers. So, as small as this news piece sounds, I think there's some major implications here. And it's going to be interesting to see what Apple do, because right now the integrations are definitely in the Prime Video app's favor, even if the design and the usability of the app is terrible. But that could be changed in a single update, right? So,
yeah, it's an interesting story. Of course, one of the things that's always happening behind the scenes with Apple TV is Apple's negotiations with their streaming partners, and Amazon being one that has had some interesting stories come out of kind of how those contracts work and whether or not they support in-app purchases and all this kind of thing. It's interesting relationship for sure, and this is just the next step in that. Seeing Apple TV Plus divorced in a way from the TV app is really interesting, because we've seen Apple put the TV app on every device that they possibly can in order to make Apple TV Plus available to people. And I think the only kind of comparable thing we've seen is Apple Originals coming to Canal Plus in France. That was, I think, the first time they were really available outside of the TV app, and now we're seeing it here as well. So it might be a little bit of just Apple trying to get the service out in front of as many people as possible while not putting as much emphasis on the TV app itself. But it definitely does have implications for the relationship between Apple and its customers and the user experience of watching these. Then again, of course, Amazon Prime is a huge service, has a ton of subscribers, and as that go-to service for a lot of people, then Amazon Prime Video obviously has a lot of people who maybe that's their primary way of watching TV, or their only way. They just open that app and watch whatever's available there. So it's good to be in front of more people and make it available to others, but it's definitely an interesting development that we'll be keeping an eye on.
One little tidbit, I recently checked the TV app on an Amazon Fire Stick. There's been a little bit of development there now. You actually can choose your user profiles within the app on third-party hardware, which I thought was really interesting. So I'd imagine with the continuous development of the TV app experience on third-party hardware, we're going to see both still live side by side on Amazon's platforms.
You just got me thinking too, is this the first time you've been able to sign up for Apple TV Plus without an Apple account?
Oh, maybe you will still need... Oh, no, I guess you won't.
Because the billing's all through Amazon, so that's interesting too. Yeah, it's new ground here, and we haven't actually seen it firsthand yet. It's an announcement that just came out and is coming soon, but it'd be interesting to see how exactly it's implemented and how it all works. Interesting days, Sigmund.
Yeah, as I say, the Prime Video app isn't picking up any awards anytime soon. But I can tell you about 2 awards that have been picked up this week, and they are for the Critics' Choice Celebration of Latino Cinema and Television, including Comedy Series of the Year for Acapulco and International Series of the Year for Midnight Family, which is currently streaming on Apple TV+. So very, very cool news coming out of the Critics' Choice this week.
Most definitely, and congratulations to all the winners of those awards, including the 2 Apple Originals. We're almost to this week's releases, but before we get there, we've got one more highlight this week, a series that we have to talk about as it debuts today on Apple TV+, and that, of course, is Disclaimer.
Acclaimed journalist Catherine Ravenscroft built her reputation revealing the misdeeds and transgressions of others. But when she receives a novel from an unknown author, she is horrified to realise she is now the main character in a story that exposes her darkest secrets.
To a beacon of truth, somebody who inspires me every day.
All these years, you have managed to keep parts of yourself from the world. Until now.
The man turns up and he tells me that you are in this book.
How can you sleep at night?
Stephen, I know you're there.
The world needs to know the truth.
Directed by Alfonso Cuarón, based on the novel by Renee Knight, and starring Cate Blanchett, Kevin Kline, Sacha Baron Cohen, Leslie Manville, Louis Partridge, Layla George, Cody Smith-McPhee, and Hoyun, with a score composed by Phineas O'Connell, of all people. Devon, you've had the opportunity to check out, I think, the first episode of Disclaimer, jumping straight into the deep end. What did you think of this series and the format and where this could be going. There's just so much here to kind of take apart.
Yeah, there is. It's a lot to take in, and it's all great stuff. I'll just say that from the beginning, kind of spoil my thoughts on it. It's really enjoyable, this first episode so far, and a 7-part series, so lots to look forward to as well. But as you said, pulling things apart, I think that's a great kind of way to introduce this series, because there's really these 3 storylines that are playing out that interweave as the show goes on, and it's not entirely clear when you're introduced to them exactly how they tie together, but pretty quickly you understand how these people are related to each other. And, oh, that's so-and-so, and that's so-and-so. So just as a quick kind of primer on what's happening here, the first storyline follows Jonathan, played by Louis Partridge, who is a young man traveling in Italy. Then there's the storyline that we talked about in the synopsis following Catherine, played by Cate Blanchett, who's a journalist accepting a prestigious award and receives this mysterious novel in the mail. And then the third storyline follows Stephen, played by Kevin Kline, an interesting portrayal here for sure. He's a grieving husband and father who makes a discovery while going through his late wife's things. All 3 of these storylines, I'd say, are fascinating in their own right, and then seeing them come crashing together as the episode goes along and see how they're interweaved, it's very interesting. They all kind of have their own style to start off with, at least. Jonathan's story is portrayed in flashback with these old-timey film transitions in and out. That's actually how the whole series starts, is with one of these flashbacks, and then you get that vignette fade to black, which classic and cool to see come back. And then Catherine and Stephen, they're more contemporary storylines, and they're narrating them as they go along, which I think is a little hat tip to the fact that this is based on a book. It gives it a very kind of book story-like feel, which fits very nicely, of course, with the plot of the show, which all centers around this book that's telling a long hidden story. And it mysteriously appears in Catherine's life, bringing up memories that she'd rather leave buried and doesn't necessarily want to talk about with anybody. And then as the episode goes on, we see where the book comes from and how it starts to spin Catherine's life out of control. And that's kind of that's just a little primer on what's happening with this first episode, getting into disclaimer. But really, to me, just based on what I'm seeing so far and kind of the marketing and leading up to it, this seems to be a story about the stories that we tell ourselves and what happens when we lose control of the narrative, which we see very quickly happen here. And so it's a fascinating, almost meta kind of thing happening here, but also I think very relatable in the sense that we may not all have that super deep, dark secret of like life or death type thing, but we all have stories that we tell ourselves and prefer that other people don't interrupt, right?
Absolutely. I want to say very quickly, what a great understated performance in this first episode, especially from Sacha Baron Cohen.
Oh, yes. I'd say all the performances are pretty understated, except for maybe Kevin Kline, who he's over the top on purpose, which is excellent. But yeah, there's a tension to the way the characters are just about in the world, especially within the home that, Sacha Baron Cohen plays the husband of Catherine, and he does a great job he's the supportive, doting husband, but there's just an edge of something to his performance that I find really compelling as well.
You remember a few months ago we talked about the fact that the first 3 episodes were shown back to back at Venice, right? And followed was a rapturous applause. And I thought, wow, that's a long time. This flies by because you're constantly trying to pick things apart and see how everything interconnects, especially early on. And there is some incredible rewatchability in this. Alfonso Cuarón is a master, right, in this type of filmmaking, and the way he is able to explore identity, politics, and craft it into, I'd call it an erotic thriller, Devon. And that, in its simplest form, may put some people off. But when I say erotic, I don't mean it in the sense of to titillate, but instead to say that this show says a lot about our relationship with the obsessive details of other people's lives, and not necessarily our stories. but other people's. I won't say too much more because you've only seen the first episode. But this is absolutely stunning. And it has a real treacle black humour to it, that is very Alfonso Cuarón.
And it works so well for me and for you as well. And I think for a lot of people, this is going to be something that you're going to enjoy a lot. So I think we both highly recommend checking it out. It's intriguing. It hooks you from the start. And I think it's going to be a really fun ride over these 7 episodes, which kick off today on Apple TV Plus with the first 2 parts.
Also today on Apple TV Plus, we see a new episode for the wonderful La Maison, alongside, I can't believe I'm saying this already, the finale of the sophomore season for Pachinko. Where did the time go? But also in a packed week is the premiere of The Last of the Sea Women, a fantastic documentary that shares the story of the Jew Island and a fierce group of South Korean divers who fight to save the vanishing culture from looming threats. A beautiful documentary that we will no doubt revisit very, very soon on the show. If you see it featured in a pre-roll, definitely click and add to your up next queue. Kind of going back through the week that has been, we also saw finales for both Bad Monkey and Slow Horses, with a really cool preview of yet another season of Slow Horses right at the end. We love those. Alongside new episodes of Where's Wonder and the Critics' Choice Award-winning Midnight Family. Of course, we saw on Apple Vision Pro on Thursday the premiere of our highlight for this week, Submerged, and the worldwide debut of Elevated, so now available to all Vision Pro users. If you want something slightly more interactive, well, Apple Arcade have goods.
Yes, they do. We wanted to make sure we shouted out all the latest Apple Arcade releases that are available to you. We've got NBA 2K25 Arcade Edition, Food Truck Pup Plus, Farista's Cat Cafe, so you don't have to choose if you're a dog person or cat person. There's one for everybody this month. As well as Smash Hit Plus, which is a fun game I've been playing. And, of course, Balatro Plus, which came to the service last month and heard lots and lots of people saying really good things about that. In terms of extras this week, we've got the making of Submerged, the behind the scenes that I mentioned earlier. Definitely check that out to learn more about how they made that. It's just an incredible process and really, really cool to see. The Bad Monkey original series soundtrack is now available on Apple Music, so check that out and add that to your library. We'll link that in the show notes. There's a behind the scenes from Wolves featuring a breakdown of the car stunt scene with Austin Abrams, talking about his experience of shooting that and how it was all put together, which is very cool to see. For Pachinko fans, Lee Min-ho and Kim Min-ha revisit moments from Season 1 in a behind-the-scenes video. And finally, as we prepare for the debut of Shrinking next week, you've got an actually helpful recap with Lakita Maxwell, catching you up on Season 1, getting you ready for the second season. I love these recaps. I appreciate them putting them out early on YouTube, so you're not waiting until the first episode actually drops. You can be prepared. And this one's great. She does a great job narrating it. And so much happened in Season 1, so it's good to catch up.
Devon, I'm so excited for the
Yes.
return of Shrinking. And that is a packed week for Apple TV for this week. But, of course, we end this episode, as we do every week, with our Up Next picks and TV app highlights. Very, very short on the TV app highlights this week. Of course, lots of shows ongoing. Personally, I'm addicted to Penguin on Max. It's really surprised me. I thought it might be a bit kooky. Colin Farrell from Sugar is in this as the Penguin. You do not recognize him. I think maybe there was one point where he laughed and I heard a bit of a Colin Farrell Irish laugh, but completely unrecognizable. Absolutely transformational performance here and a great supporting cast. Yeah, really scary stuff. But beyond that, if you're just looking for some quick features, Bad Boys, Ride or Die has come to Netflix. I've heard very, very good things. I've heard it's a true return to form for the franchise. And talking of franchises, it wasn't a franchise until recently, but Beetlejuice, the sequel to the original, is now available on PVOD. And I'll throw this in there, something that reappeared on my Up Next queue, something I watched actually in a binge during some hospital time at the beginning of this year. The Floor returns with its second season on Hulu. It's a great game show, great concept, where everyone finds a spot on the floor and they try and take over a particular area, and there's challenges coming from everywhere. Everyone's got their own expertise. Oh, Devon, I'm so glad you introduced me to this game show last year.
Well, I'm proud that you're sticking with it and recommending it here again, because sometimes some of these shows that I pick out, I feel like they're a little bit frivolous, but this one, it really does get your hooks in you. And Rob Lowe does a great job hosting it. And I'll tell you, Sigmund, this year's even bigger. They have even more contestants, so they're extending the season and have even more of those trivia challenges, which are so much fun to play at home. This needs to be an Apple TV app home game that you can play with other people and on share play.
Oh, yes. Or an immersive game.
Yes, yeah,
right?
that'd be great too.
Where everyone's got their spot in their home. You'd need a fair few Apple Vision Pros, but it could work. It could work. You said about the game show getting its hooks into you. I thought that was actually a great transition to my final highlight for this week in the TV app, and that is the pre-order for Alien Romulus, which makes its way to the TV app and is available now to pre-order. In terms of Up Next picks, very quickly for me, Steve McQueen's back catalogue. We'll link to a profile of Steve McQueen in the TV app. But specifically, I want to shout out Small Axe, which is a limited series from 2020, mentioned earlier in the show, based on the real-life experiences of London's West Indian community and set between 1969 and 1982. It is an absolute masterpiece, and if you're wanting to kind of get au fait with Steve McQueen's work in the lead up to Blitz, I think this is a great starting point. Available on BBC iPlayer in the UK, Amazon Prime Video in North America, and also available to purchase in full for $12.99 in the TV app. So one that I would highly recommend getting out there and owning.
Nice, and a great primer to get ready for Blitz coming up very soon, which we're excited for. For my pick, I'm going to go back to what I was talking about earlier with the frivolous picks, kind of silly ones, but I think one that might lift some spirits this week if you are looking for that sort of thing. It's called Nobody Wants This. It's a romantic comedy series on Netflix starring Kristen Bell as a relationship podcaster who falls for a rabbi played by Adam Brody. If you're curious about this one, just watch the trailer. It gives you a very good feel for the vibe, and it looks like the kind of show that it's just a fun ride, make you feel good, and who doesn't love a romantic comedy from time to time? There is an Apple TV Plus connection here because it also stars Justine Jupe from The Big Door Prize, a show that I'm still mourning the loss of and will forever miss for sure. So good to see her in another series. It's 10 30-minute episodes, all now available on Netflix, and one that I think is worth checking out. It's on my list. I haven't watched it yet, but it's one that I want to very soon.
Yeah, recently read that Apple actually passed up on this series. So I'm looking forward to checking it out now that Netflix grabbed it.
Yeah, Apple did, and it became the number one show on Netflix, which is interesting. I guess it just shows maybe different audiences looking for different libraries, but I'm glad this show's doing well and worth checking out. That's all from us this week. Of course, we want to thank everyone so much for listening, taking the time to spend with us this week. If you ever want to reach out and share with us feedback on things that we're talking about, things that you're watching, things that you think we should be watching, we'd love to hear your recommendations and feedback. So you can contact us on social media via the links in the show notes, and you can email the show or send us an iMessage to magic@macstories.net.
We'll be back, of course, next week with the return of Shrinking, oh yes, and recaps of Bad Monkey and Slow Horses. We'll be back on our regular slot on Wednesday. So until then, stay safe, watch some Apple TV, play some Apple Arcade, and have a great week. Stay safe, everyone.